There's a lot of news these days about the struggles of the Catholic Church in America. Not enough priests, not enough people in the pews, an institution with a bleak future. But most of the coverage is based on the East Coast. Out west, there's a different story to be told, and Father Jim McDermott wants to tell it. He's a writer at America Magazine, the highly regarded Jesuit publication, and he's been speaking with bishops starting all the way up north in Yakima, Washington, to all the way down south in Tucson, Arizona. He says out west the church is booming and deserves attention.
America needs to talk to more than just the issues in New York. The joke when I was an editor there was, it's too bad there's already a magazine called New York Magazine, because we could have been called that, because all we were writing about is Central Park and the Lower East Side. And what about the rest of the country?
What about the rest of the country? While some naysayers say the church is dying, they're wrong. Perhaps it's only changing face. More than half a century ago, almost half of America's Catholics lived in the Northeast. Today, that's down to little more than a quarter. And Los Angeles outpaces New York's Catholic population by almost 2 million. The church in the West is also young. McDermott cites a Pew Religious Landscape study that says more than half of the Catholics in the West are under age 50. But what's the difference from coast to coast?
Our sort of model is much more Vatican II centric. So interested in the empowerment of the laity, interested in sort of a more inclusive vision of the church. And I think the reason that that's the case, from what these bishops said to me, is it's sort of necessity. There aren't that many bishops, there aren't that many priests, and there are a lot of Catholics, and a very diverse group of Catholics. And so what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. So in this situation, in some ways the politics are shown to be are sort of secondary. The most important thing is trying to provide a way to care for sort of the people, these many, many different people that are coming to these communities.
Having spent time on both coasts, Father McDermott says there's a restless creativity in the West, a pioneer's drive to understand and adapt.
It's able to pivot, like an institution that's new in its early sort of life can pivot more because it's got less sort of history and sort of institutional baggage that it has to carry. And that might be a model for thinking about sort of some of the institutions in the eastern part of the United States versus the West, that some of them have a lot more institutional history, which is of great value, but it can also make it more difficult for them to pivot to meet the current sort of state of affairs in the church. Not that it's impossible, but in some parts of the West anyway, they just don't have as much history, and that ends up being an asset as well as or instead of a limitation.
When Father McDermott asked bishops in the West to name important issues in their diocese, they didn't talk about what divides people. Rather, they seemed to adopt the outlook of Pope Francis, describing a mission church, reaching out to help immigrants, prisoners, and farmers. And perhaps signaling that once again, change may sweep the United States from west to east. Reporting for Currents, I'm Michelle Powers.